You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, Los Angeles, welcome back to the LA Football Show. Thank you all for making us a part of your day. If you're on radio, welcome into the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio podcast. What's up, Bruins fans? Excited to talk to you all about your mighty Bruins as we inch closer to the season. I was in Vegas with Will Decker for Pac-12 Media Day, so we have some stuff to get into about that again. A lot of news swirling around the Pac-12 in general. We did a really fun live show last night going into that. So we'll maybe discuss some of that. And then obviously some expectations for, fall camp as things should be kicking off here real soon. But my UCLA brethren, the mastermind behind the Bruins and also the madman behind the LA Football Network, Jamal Madni. What's up, man? Happy to talk Bruins with you.
Always a thrill to talk the beloved Bruins here, Rye, and always a pleasure to do it with you. Excited to talk about Pac-12 Media Day and just all the commotion associated with the Pac-12 after Media Day that we're sort of been living through here these last 48 hours. So always a pleasure to do it with you.
Wild, yeah. Quickly, show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. Vegas was hot outside of the casino, but also inside the casino with comments from the commish. And now we see his backpedaling, if you will, kind of come to fruition. So how do you want to do this, Jamal? Do you want to start with some generic Pac-12 talk, or should we talk just kind of what happened with the Bruins at Pac-12 Media Day?
Let's talk some Pac-12 and then go into it with the Bruins. Absolutely.
Okay. So George Kliavkoff, basically said we have deals in place. I'm paraphrasing, but we're not going to announce the media deal because we want to keep the focus on football, which everyone there knew was BS. Because that's something that important. You probably just announce. And now here we are a week later, no media deal announced. CU has officially announced their rejoinment to the Big 12 starting next season. And there's rumors of other teams potentially following suit. The most notable or the hottest rumor right now is the University of Arizona. But I'm sure others, Arizona State, Utah, will potentially follow suit as well. So we talked a lot last night. So if you listen to our live show last night, there may be some repetition here. We'll try to keep it a little fresher, a little different takes maybe. But Jamal, just your overall thoughts on kind of how the commissioner keeps almost like getting offended that these questions are coming and brushing them under the rug. But then everyone knows by him doing that it's going to have implications later, and implications just keep happening, and they just are acting like they're not there. So just your thoughts on that whole thing.
Yeah, it was the worst day of the Kliavkoff era as Pac-12 commissioner, and I've been very sort of gentle with Kliavkoff given just the mess that he has inherited. But that was a public relations debacle, and the beginning of Pac-12 Media Day was kind of over after Kliavkoff's comments because everybody was sort of waiting for what he was going to say. It was sort of the equivalent of an earnings call, a quarterly earnings call on Wall Street with one of the biggest companies, and you're waiting for what the CEO is going to say in terms of revenue and earnings and operating margin and all that good stuff. And you would think the perfect day to announce a media rights deal is on the conference's media day. And so not only does he not have a media rights deal to announce, he says, well, we've got all of these options that's only going to help us later. And if anyone knows anything about negotiation, as the time goes on, based just on time value of money, your optionality becomes less. So he was just illogical completely in that regard. And then there was sort of rumors about possibly the CW wanting to make a bid for the Pac-12. I remember the CW, Ryan, for shows like Gossip Girl and Gilmore Girls and Dawson's Creek. I don't remember seeing a lot of top-end football on the CW. So, and it was sort of poetic that the CU athletic director and the CU brass sort of walked out of media day immediately after the Kliavkoff comments and ultimately started planning for the Big 12. And I think there's just such rich irony here, Ryan. If we, rewind the clock 2 years, the Big 12 commissioner actually approached Kliavkoff his first few weeks on the job right after Texas and OU announced their move to the SEC and proposed a merger to merge the Big 12 and the Pac-12 to kind of protect this conference. He saw it coming in terms of the SEC. He saw it coming in terms of the Big Ten. Klevkov said, no, we're fine on our own. He kind of looked at the Big 12 as a lesser than conference. And now fast forward almost 24 months, and the Big 12 is now going to start poaching the Pac-12. And they're the ones that are going to survive. And the Pac-12, really where this is going is the demise and the end of the Pac-12 here, I think in the next few days to next few weeks.
It's fascinating because when Texas and OU decided to leave, and then there was, I'm trying to think back and I'm thinking on the fly, but I feel like there is other teams that left also, or at least we're talking about leaving. Obviously, Colorado had left before Texas and them because Colorado left the Big 12 to join the Pac-12. But there was a period of time when it looked like the Big 12 was not going to make it. It was like, this is a fledgling conference. And then they got, I think West Virginia joined. I think they got some other schools to join. Cincinnati now is there. But it seemed like they were the ones that were dying, and they were able to somehow kind of adapt and stay afloat, if you will. And now the Pac-12 is in their shoot, what the Big 12 was maybe 4 years ago. Now the Pac-12 is there today. And I just don't see any path where the Pac-12 does survive. I think we talked about it last night, but the fact that San Diego State was flirting with coming, and then they decided, no, they're going to, whether it was because of the $6.6 million they would have had to pay to the Mountain West, or because it was, they saw forthright that there wasn't a media deal on the table for the Pac-12, or they just felt we have better opportunity in the Mountain West, whatever it was, that to me is a tall tale sign that the Pac-12 is not going to survive. Because if you can't attract the San Diego State to join your conference and lock that in, no one else bigger than that is going to come. And so if you're getting even smaller, and that's no disrespect to San Diego State or smaller schools, but if you're getting even smaller schools than that stature to join you, then you're going to get out of the Power Five, even if you survive, quote unquote, as a conference. You're not going to be considered a Power Five. And how much disrespect the Pac-12 has gotten over the last decade or two, it's just going to drop even more so, unfortunately. And teams like Oregon and Washington aren't going to stick around to see that happen, because they obviously put forth a lot of importance in their football programs and whatnot. So it's crazy, Jamal, that, we live in a world, and I am a history buff. History was one of my favorite subjects in school. I still love history. I love documentaries and stuff like that nature. And we talk all the time of the importance of learning history is so you don't repeat it. And this is just another case of smart people thinking they're too smart and that they're not going to let history repeat itself. And if they would have just watched what the Big 12 did a few years ago, maybe they would have learned that they needed to do some different adaptability, because now, they're going to fold because of it.
There's just no path here, Ryan, and it's so well said for the Pac-12 in terms of enhancing the media rights value. I mean, I think San Diego State would have paid a $6.6 million penalty, to leave their conference and join the Pac-12. And given where the media numbers are, that meant that probably San Diego State was going to go into the red. And, you don't want to start off your era, in debt. And then when you look at the other schools, I mean, Fresno State, San Jose State, maybe Hawaii, but none of those are going to move the needle on more of a media rights deal. I mean, it's only going to go down from there. The only one school that maybe brings a little bit of pull is possibly SMU. That would be the school that I would, if I'm Klevkov, I'm calling them like 11 times a minute to see what you can do there because of that Dallas market. Maybe you can pull them in and stabilize. But think about what this has meant now. I mean, you're talking about the biggest media market by far in your conference. The two LA schools are gone, and arguably the best personality in your conference, Deion Sanders, is now gone. I mean, for all the talk about how big Oregon is and Washington is and some of these other schools, they're not exactly like must-see TV the way, folks in the LA market are and the way someone like Coach Prime would be. So just a catastrophic day for the Pac-12. And, again, it just kind of speaks to UCLA making the absolute right move for itself and moving forward in 2024. And so I'm excited now, Ryan, to talk about UCLA and their final year in this conference and wishing the Pac-12 the best, but UCLA is on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, exactly. So much love for the Pac-12. And, I love all the history and whatever. And there'll be a day probably end of this year where we can really maybe dedicate a full episode to reminisce. But at this point, it's kind of like good riddance. Like, I'm very happy UCLA is moving on to the Big Ten, and the rivalries will now, there'll still be some historical rivalries that they'll still make happen. Obviously, USC is going with them, but I think they'll still have the Cal game at least as often as possible. But now having new rivalries like UCLA and Wisconsin and Michigan State and Ohio State and Penn State and all these historic programs that we get to watch at the Rose Bowl and that we get to go watch UCLA at their houses. So excited for that. Now, me and you haven't really get to talk. I'm kind of pivoting quickly a little bit here, but one of my biggest, I don't want to say observation. I'd seen it maybe before, but definitely an observation. This one was when in regards to head coach Chip Kelly. And, Will and I have talked about it. You and Will maybe have done a Bruin Bible and talked about it, but I know me and you haven't. So we can kind of talk quickly about it and just how I think charismatic he was in this instance of Media Day, how open he was, how emotional he was when certain questions, specifically about the late Bill McGovern, how honest he was. And I think it was a side of Chip that, not a lot of people see, not a lot of people know. And I think, seen it before in flashes. We've been lucky enough, but you still don't see it in terms of like grand media or large media. And it was one of those when it wrapped up, and I'm not saying he's hated by any means, but he has this stigma of kind of a Belichick, kind of a dystopian to him, if you will. And leaving that, I was like, how is this guy not one of the most beloved coaches in the entire conference, if not the country? I mean, he just seemed like such a genuine, heartfelt guy. And maybe he's softened over the years. Maybe it's the university saying, hey, we're going to the Big Ten where there's a lot more media. You got to show yourself a little more. Maybe it was a combination of both. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the factor is, but it was so refreshing, Jamal, to see this side of head coach Chip Kelly. And it just further put the stamp that me and you have been saying for 2 years, that not only is he the right coach for this team and this university, but he should be the coach until he decides to hang him up, unless something catastrophic happens, because of what he brings in terms of football IQ, football intelligence, football X's and O's, but also just what he brings as a human being and a man of integrity, which I know is such a strong value at the University of Los Angeles, California, Los Angeles. So I think that was just super cool for me to see in person, up close and personal, kind of the real Chip Kelly, if you will.
Yeah, Ryan, I mean, I think you said it really well. What I observed from Media Day was precisely that. And that is, I think Chip is finally comfortable in his own skin again. And I think what you're seeing is the true Chip Kelly when Chip Kelly is in an environment that truly aligns with who he is. I think when you go back to Chip Kelly's career, I think he was happiest at New Hampshire. And then he was really happy early Oregon, year 1, year 2, before he kind of blew up. I think year 3 and year 4 at Oregon, the NFL was calling. There was some more pressure, all of that. He still had an offense that was light years ahead of everybody else. So there was enormous success. And then obviously, given that success, he's like, well, let me try my hand at the NFL. And he was never really a fit in the NFL, whether it was the Eagles, whether it was the Niners. And I think now he's kind of pulled back and had that introspection of who he really is. And Chip is just so much more than football. I mean, he's a guy who is a true intellect, and he's someone who has so many other interests, whether it comes to things like sports science or history or philosophy or kind of technology and the future. There's so much more to Chip. And I think we're starting to see that he's finally in an environment at UCLA that really promotes that this is more than just football. You are developing the next generation of leaders in your society and your community. And I think he's really leaned into that. And I think it's something that really resonates with him at a very deep level. And I think we saw that comfort of like, look, I got my contract extension, but I'm at a place where the chancellor, the athletic director is totally aligned with who we are as a football program. And obviously we're trying to win on the field, but we're trying to produce the next generation of leaders. I mean, he talked about it with his new director of leadership. There were just so many different angles. And so to me, it was just total alignment of coach and program in a way that really brought inner peace. And I think him speaking about Bill McGovern, rest in peace, I think spoke so much about Chip as a person, about his level of loyalty, what friendship meant to him. the fact that he was so open and teared up. I'm so proud that Chip Kelly is the coach of the UCLA Bruins. There's nobody else. Nobody else. If you gave me Nick Saban, you gave me Kirby Smart, you gave me Lincoln Riley, you gave me anybody else to coach UCLA, I would say no and say that Chip Kelly is absolutely the right guy for UCLA, because UCLA is trying to do more than just build a football empire. And I think that alignment between philosophy of Chip and team really, really resonated. And I think the on-field success is going to come through that alignment.
You bring up the intellectual and the historian side, and it was cool. Someone asked him, I don't remember the exact question, but something about the transfer portal and, do you think it's good or bad for college football and whatever? And his answer immediately was talking about the first transfer ever was in 1898, like transferring from Yale, like said his name, like all these stats, how he transferred, came back and, went back and forth. And he's like, they've been doing it since 1898. Why is it any different now in 2023? It's just a bigger storyline and other teams aren't adapting and whatever. So, definitely on par with the historian intellectual side.
He's trying to build a program, Kelly. Ryan, that mirrored Stanford of the 2010s of how do you get successful on the field by maintaining your academic standards, not losing integrity, not losing your identity off of the field, maintaining a very high bar of leadership, of productivity, of outcomes off the field, and how do you maintain it on the field? And Ryan, I'll tell you something. I predict before or after the first year of the Big Ten or right before the Big Ten, David Shaw is going to be on the UCLA staff. That is my prediction to you. I think that there will be a role that Chip will find for David Shaw to be on the UCLA staff, given what he is trying to build at UCLA. He's really modeling it after that Stanford model.
What a powerhouse coaching staff that'll be, with who they already added as the director of leadership and obviously Chip at the helm and Cody Whitfield, the young guy, and Deonton Lynn, and man, that'd be it's already a great coaching staff. You had what's his name? That is David Shaw. That is, you're not totally wrong though. I kind of
I see it. I see it happening. I see it happening there in terms of the chess pieces, but. I think Chip kind of stole the show at Media Day, and just in terms of who he was. And I think that expectations here, I know there's so much conversation right now, Ryan, around USC, rightfully so, Washington, Oregon State, Utah, the two-time defending champions. Most people have UCLA sixth, but when you look at this roster, top to bottom, on all sides, on both sides of the ball, and you look at that schedule, if they just firm up this QB decision, whether it's Garbers or more, and that person kind of stays within themselves and runs the offense, this is a team that is going to have a floor anywhere between 9 to 10 games. This is a team that very much could be 10-2, 7-2 in the conference, and be playing in Las Vegas again, and kind of coming full circle from Media Day to the Pac-12 championship game and having a berth with a chance to win the overall conference. So I think Bruin fans have so much to be excited about. And I think you're going to see the real Chip now kind of unleash a little bit because he's just so comfortable in his own skin. Yeah,
you tweeted out there'll be essentially 3 games there'll be underdogs in. USC, Utah, and Oregon State.
Yep.
And so, we've both been saying this. I for sure have been saying it. If UCLA can eliminate that one bad loss they have every year, the Arizona game last year, we can go down the list. Get rid of the one bad loss. I think it's 10 wins is the bar, because I think they're going to, of those 3 tough wins, they're going to win one of them. They always play up, like they play up to their competition. Sometimes they play down to their competition. So if they can eliminate the bad loss, I think they're easily going to win one out of 3 of those 3 really tough games, and 10 wins might get them the Pac-12 title. 11 games absolutely will get in the Pac-12 title. So this is, I think they're right where they want to be in terms of the media and everyone ranking them 6th, because that's just kind of the MO, that underdog MO, if you will. But anyone out there sleeping on this team that thinks they're the 6th best team in the Pac-12 either just doesn't follow UCLA, doesn't know what this roster is, or just putting too much onus on the fact they haven't named a starting quarterback. I get quarterback's the most important position, but in college, it's a little different than pros that, we know Garbers is talented. We know he can run this offense, and we know Dante Moore is going to be otherworldly when he's ready. So they're either putting too much onus on that or just don't know UCLA football. Because to me, this is a top 3 program in the Pac-12. To me, it's basically USC. I think Oregon State is like the sleeper, and UCLA. And then I think Utah is still very good. Oregon is still very good. Washington is still very good. But I would take those 3 above those 3 right now, end of July, beginning of August.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Ryan. I think that's kind of spot on. And I think that's going to be the question. And, my gut tells me that sometimes UCLA is going to drop one where they're a favorite, and then they're going to win one where they're an underdog. And it sort of nets out at 9-3. If they can just clean that up and play that game of discipline and win the games that they're supposed to win, this is a 10-2 football team. And I think the cannibalism that's going to take place, because there's so many great quarterbacks and we don't have divisions anymore, and all of that put together, I do think, depending on where the tie breaks fall, 7-2 in the conference with the right tiebreak, I think gets you in. And I think that I've always felt very strongly about USC being the cream of the crop in terms of the conference. And I think Oregon State is going to be absolutely phenomenal with DJ Uiagalelei and that offensive line and that defense. And I love, I read it somewhere where Washington this year with Penix Jr. is giving me USC 2012 vibes, where they came off of an awesome year. That was the 11 year when Kiffin was on sanctions, and, it was unfinished business. And that team kind of cratered a little bit and finished 7-6 after being preseason number 1. And you kind of get that feeling with Washington a little bit, a lot of hype after last year. Penix Jr., I think Washington's going to take a bit of a dip. I think in big games, I still don't trust Bo Nix. And I just don't know if there's enough talent around Utah to really be credible at this point. They need to kind of rebuild that talent base. I think it's the 2 LA schools in Oregon State. And in all likelihood, that Victory Bell game is going to determine one, if not both, of the Pac-12 title participants. And how exciting is that going to be?
Yeah, we're hoping both. Hopefully that game just means whoever's the home team, basically, in the Pac-12 title game. So that's all the time we got for UCLA Talk here on radio. Plenty more fall camp kicking off soon. We'll have plenty more coverage, obviously, all season long. This is the LA Football Show. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.